Welcome back, guys. So one of our main principles we have when it comes to creating success is to look at who's already done what you're trying to do and replicate what they did, right? So that's why today we have Kurt Walker. He's the founder of Venture House, Mainsail, and Format 360, and he's done exactly what we're trying to do. So why don't we dive right in? Kurt, do you want to introduce yourself, tell people a little about, your background?
Sure. I like bikes. No, so I'm from Park City, Utah. I grew up in the mountains. Amazing family, big time foodie. Oh, that's the one. That's the one I need to be looking at. You want to talk to you? Yeah, you just grew up kind of doing all this amazing outdoor stuff, and I grew up in a family that was really abundant in their thoughts. We would travel a lot. I grew up being a foodie, caring about music. We would travel to concerts, those kinds of things. Always really into reading and growth, and I'm really grateful because that had a really big impact on the way that I would continue to live into the future. And I've never had a job. I've never worked for anybody else, so I've always done my own thing, pretty much even since high school. So, but the through line through all that is capital. I've always had a curiosity around capital, a big understanding, a desire to really learn about investments. And I started doing that at a young age and started figuring out how do I give loans to startups, and then graduated from there into venture capital and private equity at the same time. And somehow went from like loving the outdoors of Utah and spending time in San Diego to falling in love with Las Vegas against all odds. I'm a bit of a Boy Scout. I stay out of trouble. So that's the reason I say, how did I fall in love with Las Vegas? I stay out of trouble. First of all, the food is amazing here. I'll say that. That was the hook. On all the live entertainment, all the stuff that we get to go see. But underneath all that, I started seeing that Vegas could become a canvas, create your own adventure novel where you could literally do anything you wanted to do. And so I'm really grateful to call this city home for the last 12 years. I split time here, so I'm gone quite a bit. But it's been quite a ride. And I think that what's about to come in 2024 is going to be the most exciting yet.
And what's that?
So when you're an entrepreneur, a lot of times we have to look at what we can control and what we can influence. And there's a difference, right? What we can control is what are our daily activities, our own input, what are our habits, what are the things that we directly are responsible for? Things that we influence are what are the things that we can influence but maybe involve other people or involve outside circumstances, those kinds of things. So in Las Vegas, I think that there's an opportunity to do a lot of both. If you can stay focused and stay out of the glitz and glamour and actually have a purpose, have an impact, have something you're very focused on, creating a problem in the world that you're obsessed with solving as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I think this is a really great city to do that. I think this is the best networking city in the country. We have 23 million people a year coming here just for business. So half of the people that come here every year are coming just for business. They're coming to conclude business. And then when it comes to what you can influence, this is the part I was going to get to, is as an entrepreneur, your habits make up probably the greatest thing that determines, and your identity and your beliefs make up the greatest thing that's going to determine your outcome. But what's the second thing? That would be your environment. And environment is made up, in my opinion, more than anything else of people. What are their beliefs around money? What are their beliefs around success? What's their desire to have an impact? Do they want to ask themselves the question of what kind of impact and purpose do I want to have in life, and are they willing to build a life by design to actually go out and create that? And so when we talk about what's coming this year, we have some opportunities in Vegas, and of course these opportunities are everywhere, but there's opportunities here from a leadership standpoint to say, how do I build my venture while at the same time contributing to others and making sure that I place myself in the right area of opportunity and environment? So if we want to talk from a venture startup perspective, a venture ecosystem is built up of 5 major stakeholders, and those stakeholders basically can endow, you can consider them like the funding gods, right? They can endow a particular entrepreneur with opportunity, relationships, capital, whatever it is that are necessary as inputs into the business. And so when somebody at a city level, university level, private equity level, family office level, investment level, angel investment level, whatever it is, university level, right? These are the people that tend to control community builder level. They're going to choose people that they like, that they have relationships with. And when you look at like what I call rigging the game for your venture in your life, which is, I believe the game of capital is rigged, which is the reason why my podcast is called Rigged. I believe you can rig the game for yourself by minding your environment. And so a lot of times entrepreneurs are so focused on what they're creating that they can't think about, where does me being a statesman or woman allow me to rig the game for my own success. Yesterday on the Pitch Kung Fu sessions that we do online, where we help founders learn how to fundraise, there was a founder from Las Vegas that moved here from Denver, and you got to check it out because it was one thing after another where he rigged it. It was like, we have Foxconn as a partner. We have AWS is now invested in us not going to Azure, right, to switch our servers. It was just, we chose Panasonic. Why? Because Panasonic is the Toughbook laptop of choice for all of our core audience, right? So it created this thing where he's got these partnerships that don't want him to fail. And this is the difference between coming back to environment. How do you use your environment to back yourself versus just get yourself funded? Getting funded means I'm going to give you money. Backing means I'm not going to allow you to fail.
So to build on that, with what we're trying to create, I know we had a conversation before this about our vision. How do we create an environment that can rig the game for us and what we're trying to do?
Yeah. Well, superpowers, right? So you guys, your superpowers are content. That tends to be one of the things. As people that are originally musicians, which is one of the through lines that you guys have, you guys are already drawn towards content. You know, music before it was ever recorded was content that was put out in front of public, right? We've kind of come back to the roots of like, where's the money in music? The money in music is all in performance. It's all in content. That's the only place. So doubling down on that superpower. Also rigging the game. If we talk about skill sets, and I did an interview a couple months back where I talked about the 5 things I look for in an entrepreneur. One of the ones I bring up is an understanding that acquisition of audience is the second hardest thing to do in all of business. And that's where marketing comes in. As a funding guy by background, it's amazing to me how often founders think that their product is going to sell itself. If you build it, they're not coming. That's not how it works. 100%. You have to understand the client acquisition side of it. So you guys being content-focused individuals and entrepreneurs, that is a superpower you can develop, is that marketing skill set. In fact, more founders need to be good at marketing than they need to be good at building their product. And the reason is that the audience will tell you what they want to buy. Give them to it. We had a founder on yesterday. He's had 3 exits. His last one was $300 million. And he was talking about why. I asked him, why did you create a debt structure to fund your company? And he goes, because my investors told me that that's what they wanted. I'm like, you built the investment thesis and the way that you were going to raise around what they told you they would fund. And so again, marketers intrinsically, if they're a great marketer, understand if I'm going to A/B test something, they understand that I need to see what the audience wants. And so this is something we bring up a lot in our fundraising fluency sessions before founders go to pitch for capital. Have you taken the time to talk to 100 clients? Have you done the work to get that feedback? Do you understand that iterative process? Yes, the more you pitch, the better you get at pitching. The more you have client conversations, I call it the 100 first tries or 100 first conversations, the better you understand your product or your service. And so that is a superpower. Fundraising itself is a superpower as well. I think the hardest thing to do in all of business is to acquire capital and to really understand, like the hardest thing any founder is ever going to have to do is to go raise for their company. And by the way, most businesses never raise. 98% of all companies are small businesses and they never raise capital because they have to cash flow from what? Customers. So as I say to founders, you don't have a capital problem, you have a customer problem. You don't know how to acquire customers. And no amount of capital will fix your inability to acquire customers. It's just a license to burn my money, my investment money, into the trash.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what you're saying, and by no means do I have even close to the experience that you have with fundraising, but when I was in the music industry, trying to figure things out, completely broke. I was working with a bunch of big name artists, but not making much money. And then I accidentally stumbled upon raising money and acquiring investments for artists.
I'm an accidental raiser.
An accidental raiser, right? And it was like that kind of situation where the first situation was beginner's luck, and it was $1.4 million for this artist named Quiz. And after that, I thought, okay, this is probably how I can make money in the music industry, and continued to do that with other artists. Never hit that big again, but had some other successes as well.
What's cool about that? I don't know if there was a point you were going to make. I want to let you finish.
Sure.
So I believe in natural laws and principles. We can get into law of attraction, law of vibration, law of whatever. But there's also the law of gravity. We can argue against gravity all we want, but we know gravity's going to win. And it's impartial. It doesn't care. Doesn't care, right? I like the law of gravity. I'm a mountain biker, so I very much like that if I go to the top of something, I get to come down it. That's can be the really fun part. What's cool about what you did is you said I was accidental, but you still harnessed the natural laws, I just made this up, of fundraising. And that is that you have a product, that the market needs and wants, and that an investor understands the alignment of that, sees the upside of that, and was willing to front not an insignificant amount of money for your first raise, brother, 1.4 million. Awesome. And so in harnessing that, it worked, because you don't need to be an expert. When it comes to natural laws and principles, they work. You either get aligned to them, or you can deny that they exist, and you can pay the price, right?
Yeah.
100%. And the thing that I realized in that process was, even though I was doing it accidental, as the second and third and fourth time came along, the thing that the investor wanted was the lifestyle. So we didn't have a lot of leverage, because in music, we can't say, hey, look, this is how much money you're going to make. This is going to be incredible. Yeah. Don't invest in real estate. Don't invest in this. Invest in music.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of these folks, they came up, they worked their asses off, they made a lot of money, but they missed out because they had to sacrifice.
Well, you forgot the law of rock and roll.
The law of rock and
And
roll.
the law of rock and roll dictates that everyone wants to be in the music business or show business. There's
Right.
people that say that they don't, and they're liars, and then there's those that admit that they want to be in it, right?
funny.
That's the law of rock and roll, baby. You know?
Yeah, and that's kind of the general principle behind us creating this place, right? Because we all come together with this unique blend of music and business, but the whole idea is to create this community that can foster that kind of idea, right? Because we know there's so many people out there that, like you said, like they came from this business background, they got all the success, but they want to have status, they want to feel cool, they want to be in an environment where they feel like they got the payoff of that money.
Yeah.
Because we don't just want money for money's sake, we want money to create status in whatever way we've defined status as. And for a lot of people, if we can create an environment, that becomes our lead magnet that attracts
You
the
want
network.
you want your income to have impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so one thing I would like to dive into is how you've been able to do that with Venture House. Do you mind giving us a background on all
Yeah,
the locations
sure.
you have,
Yeah.
what that process has been like?
So another superpower that I would recommend founders master and really learn, and it can start as a kernel in your client conversations of, I'm going to build the water cooler around a particular service or product, meaning I'm going to have a micro community of 10 to 30 or 40 or 50 people where I foster the conversation. They give me their feedback, and I learn to be an all-out expert in all things underwater basket weaving, right? Yeah. So that's a micro community, right? So I remember pre-COVID when I started really doing the community at an intentional level, not just putting on events, but really designing that customer journey, which is a whole nother marketing skill set that's very high up on the food chain of hierarchy of marketing skills, in my opinion. I realized that there was a super, super intentional way that I could do community, and everybody thought I was crazy because I was an active VC at the time. And even my own VC partners are like, what are you doing? What's the ROI on this? And I'm like, what's the ROR, baby? What's the return on relationship? And little did I know that COVID would hit, and that this would be a superpower, that once we came out of COVID, people would clamor for connection, right? Part of the reason why music is the universal language, and the key is that it brings people together that don't speak the same language, and there's an energy
Very
to
true.
it, right? And the way it makes us feel, right? The emotion it gives us. So community building is a skill set that I would strongly recommend everyone take very, very, very seriously. And if you yourself don't view yourself as one, start hanging out with those that are exceptionally good at it. It's also a skill set that you can leverage to create a moat around your business, which is to say protection, because most people will never take the time to push this school bus up a hill that is to create a community. It's that much work in the beginning. So very few people will ever do it that you won't have competitors. What does it also produce in your business? It produces customer lifetime value, which is a fancy way of saying how long do the clients stick around and how much cash flow do we make out of them versus our CAC, which is your customer acquisition cost in marketing speak, right? How much did it cost to acquire each person? And community reduces those numbers and increases the loyalty of them because you're loving on them.
Russell
Right.
Brunson talks about that in his book,
Yeah.
Expert Secrets. He's
Yeah.
like, the key to ClickFunnels success was he turned it into a cult. Right? What happens the first
Sure.
time you sign up for ClickFunnels? You get your hashtag funnel hacker t-shirt.
Yeah.
And he literally says in the book, like, people would literally keep their $300 a month ClickFunnels subscription, not use it, just because they wanted to feel a part of a community.
Mormons know how to build community. They're
Yeah.
they're very, 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 very talented at it.
Yeah.
It's part of the culture. So back to your question. I realize now, growing up in Utah and growing up around music and then doing music festivals and concerts as I was coming up in Capital, was the genesis. It was the birthplace for me of community building. I didn't recognize it as that. You know, we were doing these music festivals and concerts all over the country and in some other countries and working with artists and stuff. But it wasn't intentional. It was this thing where I was doing it. You know, in high school, I would throw all the parties. In college, I would throw all the concerts, even though I was not the entertainment chair. Little did I know that I was building a skill set around producing events and that kind of thing. So I had an experience, two experiences. One, I joined forces with a buddy of mine out of San Diego, and we started taking people on impact trips to build houses and schools all over the world. And that became a form of community. We started doing this like 8 years ago. And there were some things that were incredible about that. But what I wanted is something that was every single month you could count on it, versus just when the founder would go on the trip, they'd have their life changed. They would change the life of the family who was lifted off a dirt floor, or maybe now had education for the first time. All that's amazing. But I recognized that we needed something that was continual every single month.
Right. It's kind of like selling a product and having to sell it every time versus having a subscription, but with community.
Right. And then what happened is I had my Matrix experience in 2017. I went through transformational training. Transformational training is about 80 years old. It's a specific framework that's very tried and true. It's like Navy SEAL boot camp for the heart, mind, and soul. And anything that you're stuffing, anything that you're hiding, running away from, anything that you don't want to face, it will come up in the training room. It's not an environment for everyone. It's not for the faint of heart. These trainings are 6 months long. And it was a life-changing experience for me. I watched my brother change in front of my eyes the year before, and I was like, okay, sign me up. I was a growth-minded individual before, but it really gave me a framework to really be more in my heart than in my head, and to recognize when I go unconscious. And I remember being in the training room the first day, and whether it was God or the universe, whatever you believe, I thought to myself two things. How do I share this with everyone I know? And I felt like God was telling me, you must go out and build community. You were born for this, even if it doesn't make financial sense, time return sense, go out and do this. And the second part is, how do I keep myself safe from the matrix? You know, once you see the matrix and you see the code, you realize that you're still prone to falling back into it, right? As Napoleon Hill used to call it in Think and Grow Rich, it's called the drift. It's the pull of mediocrity that we're all prone to if we're not careful about our environment. We go unconscious. So I recognized that I needed to create my own safety net. And so I said, what's the answer to that? Community. If I'm at the front of rooms, or if I'm co-creating with other entrepreneurs, I'm around game changers and moonshot takers at all times, I'm less likely to fall back into the drift, because I have friends that say, hey, pull your head out, buddy. Like, this isn't how you operate. And it's amazing how much this has been a blessing to me, both the community side and the transformation side. I just had a fairly challenging personal experience, you know, on the romantic side. And it was really cool, because some of my friends that have been in these trainings and staffing trainings for many, many years, they helped me reframe that experience as life is happening for me. You get to decide, do you want to be in your heart and in your higher self with this as a frame to move forward? Or do you want to be in your lower self and be bitter and jaded and frustrated and hurt? I mean, it was hurtful either way. That's how pain is, right? Pain is not optional, but suffering is. You can continue to suffer and sit in that. So back to the community piece. What happened after that is I realized I needed to create a community, and within 6 months we stood up Spice. And Spice was a community for purpose and contribution-driven founders and entrepreneurs. We ran just under 400 events in 8 cities. We ran 2 events a month, mastermind-style dinners, open socials. Vegas, it was birthed. And it was all for supporting prosperity, impact, contribution, and entrepreneurship. And I had no idea how valuable those relationships would become, and how that would galvanize a skill set inside of me that would lead to Venture House. We didn't own the properties. We did all the events in venues that we didn't own. And so Venture House upped the ante by saying, you know what? I want to, you know, as a community builder, I now understand, and as a funder, as a guy that's always trying to understand where's all the capital flowing from, how do I create alignment to it, you know, those kinds of things. I realized that ecosystem dictated that the game be played slightly differently. And so I said, okay. And I had somebody reach out to me and say, hey, you're a pretty talented community builder. You understand the resources founders need. You understand investment. You understand how founders think. I'm a real estate expert. And I'd been living out of Airbnbs half the time when I travel anyway. And so he said, hey, we should create a network that is a deal network that's focused on impact, that we can offer co-ownership in, where we built software on the blockchain that these founders can have fractionalized ownership in these properties. And so Venture House became our venture venues that we could throw events at that would foster entrepreneurship for the community. And so we run the largest entrepreneur events on a consistent monthly basis, pitch events in Las Vegas. We have a bunch of these 10 and 20 bedroom houses. and we'll expand it probably to Salt Lake and Scottsdale next. And my vision is we'll have this in 50 cities.
And how many houses do you guys currently have?
We have a larger portfolio, but what is currently Venture House, we have 3 properties, and we'll end up with more. We're already working on our 4th one. And at some point, it'll be time, probably this quarter, to move to Salt Lake and Scottsdale and start doing each one. And from a content perspective, since we understand the importance of content, we'll have a podcast studio at each property.
Yeah, and this is exactly why I wanted to talk to you, right? Because I went to one of your Venture House events. It was literally a mansion over in Vegas, and you had probably about 200-300 people there.
Yeah, we had 250 to 350
yeah,
on
and
average.
And it wasn't just people; it was a lot of people with influence, a lot of people with a huge track record, people with $1 million businesses, and so I saw that, and it really, reminded me of this kind of grander vision I had of what we're creating now. And so one thing that I'm super curious to understand that we had from our last conversation is we don't know what we don't know, right? So we're trying to create our own vision of something similar in our own spot. But what I was realizing from our conversation is as you start to get to a bigger in place, there's more and more that comes with that, right?
Yeah.
So what's the difference between, let's say, like a $7,000 a month overhead place where maybe it checks the minimums of what we're looking through versus maybe like a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a month place. And where do you think that sweet spot is where we can foster that with not a lot of headaches and the stuff that come as you start to get high?
So again, this comes down to context, right? So it's like, what is the end goal? Is the end goal to have a place that we can co-work in? Is the end goal to have a place that we can showcase events at? Is the end goal? And it's market specific. So for example, the model we roll with, and why Scottsdale and Salt Lake next, Kurt? Well, first of all, we run almost 100 events in each city. I'm from Utah. Most of our investments have been down to Scottsdale, so we know those markets. B, we can project our construction crews to go to those properties and turn them into a Venture House. Each house will be branded and have unique experiences. So for example, Venture House 1 is going to have a lazy river around the pool, right? Probably a pickleball court. Venture House 2 was a 10-bedroom property when we took over, when we bought it. Now it's a 20-bedroom house. We bought 4 lots and put them together, right? So each property is going to have a theme. Also, market specific. Salt Lake, Vegas, Phoenix, the markets aren't all that different. You go to Miami, you go to LA, everything changes. Do we need to have 10 and 20 bedroom houses? No. I mean, I love that I can bring an exited founder, a VC, an angel in for the event and they stay with us and we're feeding them with a chef and all that. That's great. You have all these bedrooms, but in the reality, it's really that the layout of the house, the backyard, the living room, the kitchen, the dining room, which is something I learned from doing all these Spice Mastermind dinners, right? Parking. We park 250 cars. We have valet, all this.
Big.
These are things that change. You go to LA and Miami, people are Ubering. There is no other option.
Of course.
So that model is either going to be a boutique hotel situation or it'll be a 4 or 5 bedroom house that has the right space. The space is what really matters. And then you have to think about neighborhoods, and like in Vegas, we don't do HOAs because it makes it much more difficult for us to run these events. And we have to be very mindful of our neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. So we're like, hey, we want to trim the hedges. Can we bring you some food? Gift certificates. Nobody's going to park in your driveway. Because we're stretching these properties to the furthest limit of what they could be they're not a commercial space, not really. We upgrade the kitchens heavily, massive stoves, commercial grade refrigerators that span the wall, those kinds of things. Bedrooms are set up in a way that are unique. 1 restroom to every bedroom. You don't think about that when it's not a luxury rental or a place that's constantly being used for events, Talk about the range of the property. So something that we've learned over the years is that you start having, and I wrote a post this morning about diminishing returns and marginal utility, which is fancy economic speak for the more you have of something, the less valuable it becomes, and you start getting less and less value out of it, right? And I use donuts as an example of the first donut's so good. By the 10th donut, if you can even do that, you're dying. You're like, please,
Blake
never
loves
another donut.
donuts.
I love
in my
donuts.
life.
We can't start talking about
Blake's like
donuts
his
here.
diminishing return is
Yes.
70.
Right. No.
So this is true in these properties with any rental. You get to a point where unless you've got it's a different buyer that buys a property that's going to cost them $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 for the week, and somebody that's willing to pay $15,000 on a very consistent basis. There are more buyers that'll do a $15,000 type of a situation. So, but also even if you just run the property as an event space, the range is probably in the $4 to $5, $6 million range in Vegas currently.
And what does that run in monthly overhead?
It really depends on how you're running it. It depends on what's the electrical like. I mean, we're running a lot of commercial grade stuff in there, right? But yeah, I mean, you should be prepared for between $7,000 and $15,000, depending on what you're doing. You know, again, it's not just about what is the cost of the property; it's about what is the buyer
Looking for.
looking
Yeah.
for.
Do you want to expand on that, Nathan?
If you brand a property, like we've talked about with Venture House, and each house branded, the value goes up because they're like, I want to be at that place. I want to have my little after party at that place. I
was
want to do my
gonna-
little mastermind at that place.
I was going to speak on just when you're talking about community, like, and I know there's people watching this podcast from all different levels of life.
yeah.
Some are just dreamers. Some are already so, you know, have done so much in their career. But for me, I've been here for 3 years, and the thing that has propelled me in my business and in my artistry has been my relationships and how much time I have spent on every single individual relationship, and then cultivating this thing where, oh, well, if she's throwing an event or if she's going to be there, I need to be there because I'm going to meet someone of value there. And that's something that if you can create that in your community where it's not just the experience, but it's like, I want to be in that room because I know that the people associated with these people, I'm going to meet a life-changing person. I'm going to make a relationship that I know is good for me. And that I feel like Vegas is saturated with events. I mean, there's events every day going on at every time of the day. And I think that's something that people miss as branding or as a business is they just want to throw an event. They just want to have alcohol and booze and cool and this and that and flashy, but they're missing the essence of what community and events are for. And if you can really tap into that and create a message and create a brand that not only feeds someone's needs internally, not just externally, but internally, and then they can come and say, I'm going to meet someone of value. These people I know are in my space, they're in my aura, they're in my energy. I feel like that's when you can really grow in any business, but especially in the event industry, is going back into it's all about the customer experience. It's all about why you're bringing the people in the room and their literal experience from the moment they walk in to the moment that they leave and after that.
So that's value. I think, you know, community design principles, they're not intentional with community. I don't actually do events. I build community that does events. There's a huge difference in the experience. There's a reason why with no marketing tech we've done 500 events in the last 5 years. There's not a single event I've ever done or that we have ever done, it's a team effort, that has not been full. And everyone's always like, Kurt, how do you guys do this? It's really simple, value. So community design would be, there's these ranges, these spectrums that you have to keep in mind when you're designing your community. Are we on the resources side, you know, or are we on the relationship side? Spice was heavy on relationship, and is that founder heart-centered? That's what they really came for. But I'm mindful, I know from being a funder my whole life, the top 3 things that every founder is really looking for, right? I understand that fundraising is broken and that they're desperate for capital. And that's the reason why we spend time teaching fundraising fluency every single week online for free. And we do Pitch Kung Fu every single week because we understand that they think that pitching is going to get them to capital, but the reality is it's not. It's all the preparation. It's all the things of making sure their company is fundable and marketable and everything else, right? Prior. So when you design a community, you have to say, are we heavy on resources or are we heavy on relationship? Because the energy will shift or change. The more on the relationship side you are, the more glue you tend to have. But also on the resources side, it can get a bit transactional. I'll give you an example. This probably isn't fair to say out loud, but you know, BNI, Business Networking International, which is one of the biggest communities in the world. They have 800 cities. This is not to be disrespected. They tend to be, it tends to be very based on referrals. Now, this can be done well. I know some of the guys that help build BNI, and they're incredible. They care about people, right? This also can be done poorly, right? But these are design things that you get to think about as you're constructing your community. Is, you know, what is the real product that we're offering? You know, what is the experience we want to give? It's rare that I find people that actually design experiences, that actually think intentionally from the minute they get the invite to the minute that they leave. What is that like? It's like 1 in 100 that does that. Most of the time, it's just an event.
How do you monetize community?
I don't care if I do or not, but that's me, because I know how to make money from relationships. That's where the real money is. Let's just use LinkedIn for an example. You could have a marketing firm that makes money on clients, or you can make money on all the deals that come in the inboxes. That's where the real money is. The average transaction value on LinkedIn is 15 grand. That's good. But if you're a guy like me, I don't do stuff for 15 grand. I build relationships that I know are 7 and 8 figure or even 9 figure type possibilities. I don't invest in a company thinking I'm going to make 15 grand. I invest in a company saying we're going to have outsized impact and this is a 7 or 8 figure enterprise, in option. So now how do you monetize it? Again, that's a decision you make. Do you want to monetize it up front? I think that's small potatoes. Most of our stuff is free. And by the way, we don't just do stuff for founders. We do stuff, I have a brand called Mainsail, that we do stuff for high net worths and for funders. It's family offices, and we don't charge for that. We do hangar events, 450 funders come to that. Why? I don't want to be looked at as a service provider. I want them to look at me as a peer. So I'm like, you're coming to my party, and this party is one of the, think about it. You're a family office. You can afford to pay for anything. You've exited your company. You're worth $1 billion. The average family office manages $1 billion. Family office is a founder that's exited their company. The through line in everything I do, the intention behind everything I do, the North Star for everything I do is to produce more founder funders, which is a founder that's capitalized, which is the reason I'm building a funding platform to streamline and simplify and automate the fundraising process, get them to an exit so they could become a founder funder and a family office. Why? Because they're the ones that write checks that create these ecosystems, right?
And
Tony Hsieh did it here in Las Vegas. In Utah, it's happening, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. So I'm really glad, Desi, that you brought that up about intentional community, and I really appreciate the concept of being less transactional and playing the long game for these things. And that all really comes down to what you said earlier about the matrix and like cracking the matrix and making sure that you're not drifting, as Napoleon Hill said, in just going into the classic norm of what society has, a cookie cutter approach of the way you live life. And so when you ask a question to us, as Jackson mentioned, we don't know what we don't know, about, well, what's the overall intention?
Yep.
That really gets me going, because when Jackson, you and I met prior to this, you said, are you guys ready to get into real estate? And we both looked like, no, not at all. That's not what we're trying to do. And so we left that meeting really realizing that there are a lot of very complex ways that we could approach this that would result in us basically committing to an entirely different business, which we don't have the bandwidth for. And so I think a question that we have for us, and then also for viewers and listeners who are focusing on their own ventures and have their own things that they're wanting to accomplish that are aside from their main income source that they don't want to divert their attention from, is what is a low-hanging fruit way that we could accomplish this without diverting our attention from what matters?
So this is something I'm going to be talking about a lot in the content is business model. I'm a venture guy by background. I've seen thousands of business plans. I've been pitched probably 17,000 times. I get pitched 200 times a week. We run Pitch Kung Fu every single week, as I mentioned. Business model matters. You can have, like Desi, you can come to me with a business and you can say it's a music app and it has this business model and it's going to monetize and acquire users this way. Or you could come to me and say, I have a music app and it's going to do this, 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 and this. And it can be a completely different business with the same product.
Right.
Because of business model.
Of course.
Right. We know these fitness influencers online where they started as a personal trainer, and as they gain followers, they have more audience, they're able to monetize in different ways. Their business model shifts, their freedom ideally hopefully shifts, their flexibility of lifestyle shifts. So these are decisions you make. So Spice was designed around, I stole from the greatest community builders in the world. I looked at Weight Watchers. I said, how do they make it 30 years? I looked at CrossFit, said, how do they create rabid fans? It's a box. It's a business in a freaking rectangle. It's a gym in a rectangle. So what's special about CrossFit? It was a sense of community. And then I found that I looked at the Mac Daddy of community building, in my opinion, which is AA. I said, they're scalable, they're transformational, and it's duplicatable, what AA does. And it's changing lives. And they're doing it with a couple of chairs in a damn high school gym. and if you think about like how blockchain is changing the world, I started thinking about, well, you could kill every AA meeting, and within 2 weeks, they'd sprout up again. So I took those design principles, and then I stole from transformation very heavily, the level of intention, the amount of accountability, the energy that transformation creates. And I said, how do I combine these and create this into something? And this is the reason why Spice was so popular, into a community, all right? And then I designed Spice around low burn. low cost to produce. A guerrilla style way of building community where we could do them anywhere with the right. One of the weaknesses, though, again, there's pros and cons to everything, is it was heavy on leadership. Leadership had to be very good. The speakers had to be very dynamic. The city captains, because I believe in Avengers approach to building community where it's a multi-host type of a situation. So coming to Venture House is not a beginner community type thing to build. It is heavy on capital. It's heavy on infrastructure. There's a whole machine behind it. That we're building of accelerators and venture studios and all this stuff where content studios, podcast studios, like all of this is capital heavy.
Right.
And so Venture House is not a beginner, it's not a training wheels type of community build. So what could you do? What would be a move that you could do? So I suggested to you guys, find somebody that's doing it and learn from them and partner with them in a way where you don't have the overhead, you don't have the infrastructure. Now that requires that you have to create something that's flexible to meet your vision. And it also requires that you have a little less freedom to choose anything you want, right? But if you're not planning on getting into the real estate business, look, there's a lot of overhead, right?
Yeah.
And the way we do events at Venture House is different than Spice. Spice had very little overhead, so that I could make sure that it could duplicate across the country with the right leadership, right? Venture House is going to be heavy on super connectors. And like if somebody wants to create, hey, how do I get this in my city? Bring me a super connector. Bring me somebody that has a ridiculous Rolodex and that is a dynamic speaker and leader and that deeply, deeply cares about community and ecosystem in their city, right? That's where it needs to start. Then we'll go find some of the investment for some of the property and we'll put up some of the money, et cetera, and we'll go from there. But look, Venture House is a startup in and of itself. Like we're having to figure out if we're not charging for any of our stuff, where's the income come from? Well, the principals don't necessarily need income, but it still has to be a business that runs. So that's sponsorship, that's being really creative with how do we monetize just a small portion. Every community that monetizes on the back end is going to decide how much, by what percentage are we going to monetize, and who is somebody that can afford to pay for something of value that we're giving if the majority is getting it for free.
So I have a quick question
Sure.
for you. And all of this was like so great, everything you just said. So how valuable, or if you have someone who has a awesome community, let's say this person has a great following, they throw an event and hundreds of people come out.
Yeah.
But they don't have the best infrastructures. They're great at networking, at creating following, at creating community, at creating charisma, people but they just don't have the infrastructures, but they want to fund, they want to grow, but they have this huge following, like I said, but they don't always have like the back end things. Like how valuable is that, looking at, oh, well, this person has a community versus this person has the best business plan in the world. And how do you like,
look at
how
what
do
my
you
partner
look at
did with
that?
Venture House. He came to me because he knew I had the audience. He knew that I had been investing in community for so long that, and I even gave him a challenge when he said, we're going to do this. I said, fine, give me 4 days. I'll put on an event. It'll be full.
Yep.
But it wasn't just in this case that I came only having audience. I came understanding infrastructure and I had it.
Right.
So what I would do, which is what I told them to do, is go find somebody that has infrastructure. Go find somebody that understands operations. In some respects, I would say, depending on your goal, having the audience is more valuable. However, it depends on your goal. My goal is not a light goal. I'm not here to just throw parties and events. I'm not a party planner. I'm here to produce impact. I'm here to get deals funded. I'm here to change lives, right? So for that requires heavy infrastructure on the back end. It requires understanding how capital works. It understanding being dangerous with marketing to grow this. And so I would say that the infrastructure part is probably harder if we're talking to a content-centric type audience. They're not going to understand all the back end. So for example, it would be very difficult for you guys right now or somebody else to duplicate what we've built on the funding side, the program side, all of the stuff we're offering for free. And so it'd be better if you just brought your audience, right? And found a way to make sure that made sense to do.
And that's kind of where, after we had that conversation and I really looked at the gravity of what it would take to do what you've done, I was like, that's not our intention. Our intention isn't to create some grandiose vision like you have. It's really to just create a place where we can foster a lot of each one of our brands, right? And so for me, the model that seems really logical is find someone that's looking to invest in real estate in Vegas.
Or already has it. And then create a podcast studio. The overhead's 10 to 15 grand a month. We find 5 to 10 people on a $2,000 a month retainer to rent out the podcast. And then our unique value proposition as a studio is, hey, not only are you going to come record a podcast, but it's in a studio in a mansion in Vegas, which is a lead magnet you can use to line up better guests.
Yeah.
And then
That
Our
can work.
network alone,
Additionally-
we could find 5 people.
Also, mind your
masterminds.
market, though. Understand that Vegas is a very young market from a venture ecosystem standpoint, which I see as an advantage as an early mover and as an early adopter and as someone that doesn't need everybody else to tell me something's a good idea. You know, like that's my skill set is I know a good thing when I see it. I see the future. I have to as an investor, right? So I don't need all the extra training wheels that other people need. Plus, I'm not a newbie entrepreneur. I've fallen off the mountain multiple times as a mountain biker. It's the reason I'm a decent biker. I have made more than a few mistakes as an investor. I've lost all sorts of money, learned all sorts of lessons, you know, and I'm willing to admit it. It's brought me to the clarity of vision that I now have. So again, business model is understanding, like, are we in LA where we're competing against other podcast studios, or are we in a market that's more mature? This is a very young market. So if all of a sudden we have 20 podcast studios trying to compete, unless they can go the distance, they won't make it. So for example, when we have our podcast studios, we're not going to be as dependent upon whether or not we book it out. That's not my main focus. My main focus is creating a megaphone for what we're doing, for the Vegas venture ecosystem, for Rocky Mountains in general, and then also the Avengers that are aligned with us that I want to bring with us with their personal brands, because I'm not interested in doing this by myself. I'm not at all.
Right.
Something I explained to you real quick
Training.
is that society and culture shifts. The baby boomers, and I've been saying this pre-Clubhouse, we're interested in a Superman, Batman approach. To a degree, it's like the guru style thing. It's like me and it's my community. I think millennials think differently. I think we think in terms of the Avengers. It's a team. There's different individuals with different superpowers, different problems that they've solved, different businesses they have, and we go together. It's the reason why I think Spice worked really well with that multi-host. You know, every city had 3 city captains. No event was one person talking the whole time, right? Look at this. This is a multi-host experience. It's the reason it's more interesting than any one of us talking, right? So these are things that, again, you have to like think about in your business model and in the way you design things. And so for me with content, I'm looking for the Avengers. I'm looking for people that are in the right part of their career where they've made mistakes, they have excellence, they have staying power, they're committed to content, they have a voice and something very interesting to say that they're willing to say for a year plus, right? That fits into the overall picture. And then fine, we'll back and support those individuals because Rigged is going to be great and it's cool with all the deep dives into capital and decoding and the cheat codes around fundraising, but that's just one subject.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I'm just one Avenger. I'm just Captain America. Nobody ever chooses Captain America as their favorite. They're like, oh, he's serious and he's like, you know, always the, you know, one that has to go in first. I'm fine with being that person. I don't need to be Thor. I don't need to be Hulk or Iron Man with all the crazy superpowers, right? I'll let you guys do that.
From your experience from throwing these events where you're letting people come in for free and then you're having back-end infrastructures to bring in money,
Yeah.
like what are some things that you've seen be successful that you just kind of thrown at the wall and have worked out?
So Spice, the dinners were not technically free. It was done by donation, but the value was so high. Instead of somebody saying, I'll pay $25 because that's what the ticket says, people would donate $70 to $500 to come.
Okay, I just did that. That was crazy. I just threw an event for the first time ever, and I was like, guys, I'm just gonna do donation based, and I'm gonna see what happens.
Yeah.
And I let people just donate money to come to this event, and it was a brand launch, and my band was playing, and I had partnered with a nonprofit. There was kids involved. It was surrounded about mental health, and I brought in more cash.
Of course.
Doing it donation based than trying to sit there and sell $10 to $20 tickets, because there's people that were willing to spend $250, $500, $1,000 because they wanted to support the cause and the event, and all of those 25, 30 people that did that paid for all the 300 people that didn't and that showed up.
And now you have the basis of venture capital. We're going to lose money on everyone except for the one that makes it. I mean, we're working to shift this. That needs to change.
Yeah.
That's the reason we're creating our own ecosystem. I mentioned that Founder Funders is our focus. So there's 3 things that I'm actively working on. There's the capital platform technology for funding. That's my baby. That's what I live, sleep, and breathe and think about constantly is how do we make fundraising easier? So the speed of it. How is it possible that AI and blockchain's moving at the speed that it does and it takes a year to raise capital? It's messed up. It's broken.
Right.
Number 2 is our community stack, starting with Venture House. We got all the online stuff we do for all the founders. And then we have our Mainsail family office community. We do higher end stuff. And then we have the content machine that we're building on the back end that creates a megaphone and a pipeline for all that stuff. So a couple of things with what you mentioned though.
Yeah.
It must be clear to the people coming to participate what the value is if they're going to donate and donate more than they would pay for a ticket. So there's a communication challenge, hurdle, opportunity there that you must communicate.
Yeah.
With Spice, it was very clear to people. They knew they were being invited to something special. There was live music, there was great food, and I designed into the experience things that created you had to up the ante a little bit type of a thing. Like there had to be some skin in the game type of a situation that went beyond food. What are you bringing to the table to make this your community so that you're invested, that you feel that you're a part of this, right? And in the future, I'm excited to see DAO technology on the blockchain allow us to do this at a scale where people get to participate and be remunerated, be rewarded for their input and their effort into the community, right? Back end. So if you were to look at any marketing funnel and you were to look at like what is called a value ladder, which is the series of products, informational or otherwise, services or otherwise, on a back end that you could offer, this is how all YouTube channels work. YouTube creators don't make most of their money from ads. We know this. Right. They make money from back end products. So if you have a community, you can expect that 20% of your audience, 15% of your audience will maybe, if it's done right, buy something on the back end. A smaller portion, as you move up price, will be in the 10 to 5% range, will potentially buy something. So you can think of it that way. I'm not as interested in selling services at this moment. We will do some of that. I'm more interested in doing deals. I'm more interested in transacting that way. We have done what we've done long enough, and because we're not new, we have sponsors that reach out. We just had a major bank call us and say, hey, we want to start helping with some of this. And we're to the point where I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Let's do it. We're aligned. I believe that your vision is to help founders be better founders and to accelerate and grow. Great. Another bank reached out. I'm like, we're not aligned.
Yeah.
You're going to have to spend a lot of money to clean up some of the mistakes you made this year that were very public. If you're ready to spend that money, then maybe we can have a chat. But if you're not, it's not going to work, because I don't feel good about telling founders to come bank with you based on some of the things that you did, right? There's also, when you build a circular ecosystem, there's ways that you can monetize things that get really advanced. So we're looking at some of those things, which is, how do we take value that somebody would spend money in and keep it inside of a small circular economy inside of the community, which is probably a rabbit hole we shouldn't go down right now. But that is something that we're working on.
Yeah. I really appreciate the whole conversation about why we're looking, the business models. Those things we're very unclear about. And the reason is most people, they say, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's the business model. And then we'll expound from there. And what we're doing is kind of the opposite, where it's like, we know we want this place and we know the reason why we want the place, but we don't necessarily know the revenue model, which is why we've been kind of kicking stuff back and forth.
And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay to try things. It's okay to like see what happens. It's okay we always want to start with the end in mind. That's where intention comes from, right? You know, like I didn't start Spice because I wanted to make money. I didn't put a back end on Spice.
Right.
I constructed masterminds. I had them named. I had them planned. You know, this is what we'll do at 25K. This is what we'll do at 100K. This is who the audiences are for. But we didn't launch it because that wasn't the intention. The intention was to really listen to what founders need and what they tell us again and again and again. And I learned how important the personal brand is to the founder. I learned that they were struggling with getting marketing and leads and clients into their businesses. I learned the challenges at scale that they were dealing with when it came to fundraising. I understood that they did not ask for community, but once they experienced it, they wanted it.
Right.
And by the way, guys, I'm not impressed by most communities. There's also a range and a spectrum, or I guess you could say, my version of community is a very high standard. I want people like naming their children after each other, going on trips, doing deals, breaking bread, mountain biking together, right? If it's not transformative, I don't want it.
Exactly.
I don't have time for it. And almost most communities fall short of that, and I get that. It's also like that I'm not the person that decides what community is or isn't for somebody.
Yeah.
They get to decide if they want to be part of loose affiliations. But if I'm building something, like I built Spice for me, I want to be around game changers and moonshot takers. It's very interesting that we would have some very attractive people. I'm sure we can imagine what sex these individuals were. They would come to these events and they were used to being treated a certain way based on their appearance. But they would get into the Spice rooms, into the dinners, and they would realize that everyone in the room was following their impact, following their purpose. And it made them feel very inadequate, because they realized that they weren't filled with that kind of substance and fulfillment in their life. They were building. We had one guy who was making 8 figures and he burst into tears because he realized that his business didn't matter. He didn't care, had no fulfillment for him. Now, I'm not saying that, you throw that away, you do that to go do the next thing. But what I would say to some of these individuals that were kind of used to allowing their appearance be the way that they would do things in life, I said, this is the room you should be in.
Right.
so that you can be asking yourself the
right
question
questions.
of,
Questions.
what,
yeah.
what do I feel I'm meant to do? What's something that I'm obsessed with? What's a problem in the world I'm obsessed with solving? I can't stop thinking about
I
it.
have a question on that. So I was watching literally this TED Talk on the way over here about how to ask better questions.
Yeah.
And our ability to ask the right questions will get us to something deeper, the substance that will actually create the outcome you're seeking.
Yeah, that's the reason I asked you.
Yeah.
Where's the intention?
And,
What's the end goal?
so my question to you would be, what questions should we be asking each other? And
Yeah, so this, Tony Robbins said this. He wasn't the first, I don't think, but the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of the questions we ask. So I used to have a place over in Henderson before I moved up against the mountains because I love being close to all the trails.
Heck yeah.
And I had a bunch of windows in this place. And I would write up on the wall a bunch of questions to ask myself. And I believe the more you take the time to ask yourself the question, the more you're sitting in the energy of clarity and making sure that you're not living by default, but instead life by design, because you're being intentional. Most of us run away from the deeper, darker thoughts. Most of us run away from and distract ourselves with, we're too busy serving everybody else to actually do our own homework or to clean up our own, house or whatever it is, right? Or our financial house in order, right? So the questions I came up with that were the perennial ones that I would always come back to were, who am I? Which I get to
Take
decide,
notes, people.
right? And I believe we're all powerful creators. The question is, what are we creating? We're creating, but are we intentionally creating? And, so who am I? Like, really, who do I see? Am I just an entrepreneur, or am I more than that? Am I a spiritual, eternal being, right? That is more than just this body. Where in my body am I? Am I in my heart, in my head? Where am I? I think I'm something more than that. I'm a collection of something more than that, an intelligence, right? A heart. Those kinds of things I get to take with me wherever the next life is. I don't get to take any of this fancy stuff that I get to buy or build or invest in. Number two is, what do I want to create? What am I most aligned to? If I strip away everything, what's the most essential? How do I do less to do more? And I'm, as a guy that does a lot, and everybody's like, you have tremendous energy. I know my lane. I'm really good at launching, starting things, branding things, infusing them with meaning. I don't want to operate stuff. I don't want to maintain stuff. That's for everybody else. I'm really great at that. So what do I want to create? And I want to create communities that are all over the world. I want to create technology that allows founders to get funded in record amounts of time. And I want to get them to exits so that they can pay it forward. When you see a musician do something, we're seeing drummers do things that the best drummers in the world, it took them 30 years to get to. I watched this 11-year-old girl play a Sting record that Vinnie Colaiuta played on, and she nailed it. When we seeing is believing, right? So it really needs to be flipped. When you believe it, you'll see it. But my point is when we see that something, look what's happening in the mountain bike world. They're pulling backflips off of 80-foot canyon gaps. It's insane.
Yeah.
So again, what do you want to create? I want to create a place where founders believe, and then they know that if they believe, they'll see it in creating it. And then last but not least, who am I meant to serve? And these are the questions I ask myself often. The more often I ask them, the more often I sit in the question, and then I say from an alignment perspective, does this partner bring me closer to this? Does this business opportunity bring me closer to these things? Does this woman, this partner in life that I would like to have, or that I meet, is this person going to bring me closer to that, right?
And I think one way you can peel back the layers even deeper.
And you have to be courageous with
Yeah.
the answers that
You
you
have to
get
be
when you ask
honest.
those
Yeah.
questions, right?
Yeah.
And when you start to assess, you have to be courageous to say, does this work? Does this not work?
And this is an exercise me and Nathan have gone through multiple times together. I ran with him. Is asking yourself why, and then asking yourself why again, and you ask why as many layers, and it just peels them back. It's like, okay, we want to build this space. Why? Because we want to foster a community of people that inspire us. Well, why do we want to foster a community of people that inspire us? Like, I don't know, you guys answer that, right? Like, we can keep going deeper.
It always gets down to feelings.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why I say it's believing then seeing, because we can access the feelings now.
And that's
and
what I told you, bro.
And create from that
That's
place.
that's where you
Where
create
are
from.
we creating from? Are we creating from our higher self? Are we creating from our lower self?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. The lower self has some benefits. The shadow's gotten us through some really dark and gnarly and kept us safe in certain respects. But is that the predominant place we want to be creating from?
Right.
And that's something I've been in the question with even recently with decisions I'm making going into now 2024 and who am I aligned to? The biggest lesson I got last year that God kept beating me over the head with is don't want things for other people more than they want them for themselves.
Right.
And then choose those that choose you. And I recognized I wasn't there. I had some business and some personal situations that weren't choosing me.
I want to make a quick comment that's so important that you've been like honing on is like the art of saying no to things that don't align and not just seeing
It's
this
tough.
shiny object. Oh, this person's willing to give me money. Cool. Oh, this person's willing to do this. Oh, cool. Like, and just this like thing that I see a lot of young entrepreneurs do. And it's something that I've learned to just sit back and be like, does this person's morals and values actually align with who I am? Do I actually want to be in that room, or do I want to be in that room because there's just cash sitting in that room, or
We
because
should look
there's
at
just this
ourselves
thing?
and say, are we willing to do the work?
And I've been
Yeah.
doing that. Like this year has been, even in the first couple days, I'm like, you know what? If I go there, I'm not going there because I want to go there. I'm going there because I think there's something in it for me. But that doesn't even feel good.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be there. Like, if this person, I question myself, if this person was just sitting on the streets with nothing, with no home, with no money, with nothing, do I connect to this person? Do I care about this person? Do the way they speak to me, do I like it? Does the energy that they give me feed me? Do I think they're actually being real with me, or is it just fake to get somewhere? And these type of questions have completely like shifted everything that I'm doing in my life right now. Like literally just asking that, and like the relationship with people. And then in the beginning of the year, I asked myself, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Am I doing them because someone else wants me to do them, or because I think they're expected of me, or am I doing them because I want to do them?
Yeah.
And that, I was doing so many things that I just didn't need to be doing. So, and then that just made me be like, I need to cut this off. I need to cut this off. I need to cut this off. This energy is literally being driven by someone else's like wants and needs.
Yeah, I was talking to the founder of Coachable, and yesterday, and we were talking. She said that most people, including her, at one point started by saying, "Here's what I have. What can I do with it?" Instead of saying, "What do I want to do, and what do I need to
Set
get
the
to have
intention,
it?"
plant the flag, say this is the hill I'm willing to
Yeah.
die on. You have to ask yourself, what am I willing to master? I remember on being on Clubhouse, everyone was asking, what's the easiest business I could start? And I said, you're asking the wrong thing.
Yeah.
If you want to be an entrepreneur, you better be ready to shift what doesn't work inside of you to get to where you need to be. The person that you become is not the same person that you are today. There's a gap that you get to close. And so I really believe that for me, I don't like people that don't like to do hard things. I only like being around people that like to do hard things. Why? Because I believe that you should be careful this if you're a first-time business owner. I mean, get going and moving. But I believe that the greatest wins are going to come from the things that we take on that are the hardest things. So for an example, I decided that I needed to flip the script on how I felt about fundraising as a VC. I did a bunch of capital brokering and private equity for many years, became a VC, then did a bunch of venture debt. And even as a VC, I was like, man, fundraising is really hard. This sucks. This is a lot of rejection. This is like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of no's. And we have a track record. And that's what made me realize, oh my gosh, founders are screwed. I better go build something on the fundraising side. But the point I'm making is I decided that my flag in the ground is I will be the best fundraiser in the world. The teams that I build, we will be the best. Nobody will be more obsessed than we are. And so that's something I want like everybody that watches this to think through. What are you that committed to, that obsessed with solving? Every single morning I wake up, I think of the founders I'm meant to serve. And when I go to bed, it's the same thing.
No, that gives you so much clarity, because I went through that myself, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, am I an artist? Am I an entrepreneur? Like, what am I really trying to
Right.
be? And I was like, what do I want to get the best in the world at? And I'm like, it's marketing. I want to be the best marketer in the world. And when I delve into that deeper, it's like really like, well, to be the best marketer in the world, I need to be the best storyteller in the world. And I need to learn how to tell better stories, because that's how you connect.
Yeah.
That's how you spread
Right.
the awareness and tell your vision. Now, one question I do have for you is, what guests should we seek to have on here to help us create this vision? Because there's a lot of directions we could go with this. We want to make sure we're connecting with people that can help manifest this into reality.
Right.
Who should we be seeking to get onto a format like this?
So there was a kernel in something you said. It's not in the doing and the having, it's in the being. And so the question every entrepreneur that sees themselves as more than just an entrepreneur, sees themselves as a power creator, is who do I get to be? Who do I get to be every single day? Who do I get to be in the aggregate? Who do I get to be on the long term? And I think in that as an answer to your question as well is who do we align ourselves with? So I'll give you an example. I have a very close buddy, Alex Lovely, lives here in Vegas, real estate investor. We're partners. We're launching a very large real estate fund in town. We've purchased some properties in town. We've attracted some family offices to come and work with us. We've been successful in getting a fairly substantial line of credit in place, and it's all very exciting. It was our ways of being that attracted each other. He's a community
Sounds
builder.
like us.
I'm a community. I'm a community builder, and we saw a shared vision, not just in real estate, but also in acquisition and in venture, to launch a triple threat fund across all three, and to really serve the Vegas entrepreneurs and beyond. And so, again, when you ask who should we have, I say look for that way of being.
Yeah.
Look for that alignment of energy more than anything else. I think you'll have the best conversations,
100%.
and I think it'll be felt by the audience the most. You know a kindred spirit when you meet them. They just have the right vibe, the right, everything in the universe vibrates, everything, this table. And if you pass a sound wave through it, it will vibrate at whatever the resonant frequency is. So I would look for the resonant frequency guests that match that. Law of vibration's a real thing. We get what we vibrationally, typically in the aggregate,
How do you
vibrate.
measure that if you haven't met someone before?
I have a superpower around this. I can talk to somebody for 5 minutes. I can see their material and I can kind of know. But that's because I'm used to having to meet people and make snap decisions very quickly over phone calls or whatever. The way you can rig it is you can do it through trusted friends that know what you're looking for. So for example, I have probably more relationships based on this being my thing that I focus on from an investment perspective than you guys could ever have on your podcast. So if you were to trust me, I could probably bring some people that you would probably find aligned. So it would be in finding those channel partner relationships that have the great audiences and that have invested deeply into those type of relationships, and just go with that.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I can't remember which one of you said this, but I thought it was so genius, which was at the end of each episode, just ask the guests who's 3 people we should bring on that you can introduce us to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You know
smart.
what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's so genius, because they have perspective of what you are. They understand what this is.
Yeah.
And they know which people they would trust with the platform or guard you against if they don't like this.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest takeaways as we wrap up is that instead of being transactional, instead of always seeking, as Des said, the outcome that you're looking for is to focus on being heart-centered and breaking through the matrix and realizing that everyone is human beings and we're all in this for the same reasons. We want connection. We want to feel good. We want the mass majority of people who started businesses did it because they want to survive. They want to be comfortable. They want to enjoy what they do. They want to have an enjoyable life. And so if we can remember that, as opposed to always seeking out, hey, what can this person do for us? I should go to this event because this person can benefit.
The capital and the cash flow is going to come through trusted relationships always.
Exactly.
I tell founders, the check you're looking for is going to come through the right relationship at the right time, because you've added value. You've shown yourself as a person that can be bet on, that can be invested in. So it's like, I like making money just as much as anybody else. I just like to do it with my friends.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's the thing I ask myself is, do I want to travel with this person? Do I see myself teaching masterminds, working in lockstep, and partnering with this person on a project? If the answer is yes, then I know I got something.
And that's
Preach,
powerful
preach.
because where I've fallen in traps before is ignoring someone I know doesn't align with me because they get me something I want. And those
That's what I
people
was
will
saying.
literally manipulate you because they know that.
Yeah.
And it leads to us doing things that don't align with who we are. And then you'll get everything you want in the world and be absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think we have to wrap up. Yeah.
Yep. Kurt, appreciate it.
Thank you
you
so
Great
much.
to have you.
Well, guys, if you're watching this and you made it all the way to the end of this episode, thank you so much for watching. This has been absolutely amazing. And in the next episode, we're going to keep continuing this journey and we're going to take you every step of the way. What you just heard, we're all learning here together. And we're going to take this knowledge and move forward next week and really reconvene as a group and then bring in other guests that can help us so much.
Maybe we'll have you guys go live from Venture House.
That would be
Hey.
freaking awesome. And I don't know how cool we are yet, but if you watch us all the way, make sure to like and subscribe and follow us and follow the journey and become a part of this new community that we're building. So thank you so much, everybody here. Yeah. Deuces.